Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session at the DWU Woche der Umwelt. As you realize, this is an English-speaking session in a mostly German conference format. But as we address a very global challenge in this panel today, we have a very global round of speakers here. We have chosen English as the language we work in this panel. My name is Dennis Görlich. I'm a senior researcher at the Kiel Institute for the World Economy and the program director at the Global Solutions Initiative in Berlin. The Global Solutions Initiative is a global collaborative initiative that seeks to convene and generate research-based policy recommendations for the G20 in particular. Our flagship event is the Global Solutions Summit, an annual conference bringing together academia, politics, business, and civil society to make progress on those challenges that require global cooperation. And the big idea underlying our initiative is the idea of a recoupling of economic prosperity with environmental sustainability and social prosperity. And one central problem we see in reaching this recoupling of economic, social, and environmental progress is the linear economic model. Waste of resources, pollution, waste of materials, short-term relationships between producers along the value chain, between producers and consumers. All this partly being driven by globalization, proliferation of global value chains. And this is why in this panel, we would look at the case for the circular economy. And we would like to focus in particular on perspectives of the Global South in this round. Now, before we start the discussion here, I would like to introduce the panel to you. Welcome Mustan Lavani. He's the Global Director of Public Affairs and Environmental Policy at Tetrapak. He's our representative of the private sector, a company that produces packaging, uses resources, but has a slogan, which we'll come to later on, saying that a package should save more than it costs. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. Then I'd like to welcome Dr. Saima Shafiq. She's an expert for sustainable consumption and production at the Sustainable Consumption and Production Facility of the European Union's Switch Asia program. She's working on waste management and plastics in Pakistan. Welcome, Dr. Shaima. Very glad you can join us. And I'd like to welcome Alexander Charalambous. He's a senior partner at Living Prospects. He's the lead thematic convener of the GIZ's Circular Economy Solutions Dialogue, and he's leading the EU Switch to Green facility. Alexander is our representative from Development Cooperation Technical Assistance field. Welcome, Alexander. Now, let me just start by asking all of you a quick question, starting with you, Mustan. When you just have a brief answer on that. Are you happy with our economy and how it works and how production works today? Or would you like to see some changes somewhere?
Thank you, Dennis, and for the invitation to participate today. If you want a very brief answer, the answer is no. And if you would like me to expand a little bit further, I could start by saying that, we feel at Tetrapak that our production and consumption models are broken. The world feels this, and 6 years ago, almost now, the United Nations agreed to a set of 17 sustainable development goals, which today the progress from my perspective has been fairly limited. And that's why we are very, very supportive of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Decade of Action. And we believe that 2021 is such a pivotal year to have those discussions and shift away from commitments to action. 2021 brings three major summits: the UN Food Systems Summit, the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15, and the Conference of the Parties, COP26 on climate. And that gives a tremendous opportunity to reframe the post-2020 agenda and see where we go from there. So I'm very much happy to participate today with you.
So a lot to do on the global agenda, COP15, COP26. Alexander, are you happy with how our economy, how our production systems work today?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dennis, for inviting me to this panel. I have to agree with Mustan that no, I'm not very happy. And the reason being that we are facing huge challenges, not only in our economy, but also in the society and in the environment. And we keep this obsession with an economic model that actually contributes further to such challenges, contributes to the problematic that we are facing. We should be shifting to solutions, and solutions can come by a complete reorganization of our production and consumption towards more sustainable paths. That is something that the circular economy can offer, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion and see how the private sector also agrees to that and takes action towards such a transition.
Me too, thank you. Also looking forward. We'll explore this in a little bit more detail in the next 40 minutes. Dr. Saima, are you with us? Are you happy with how our economy and our production works today?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for the question. Yes, in the context of Pakistan, I would like to say the consumption, sustainable consumption and production patterns are not currently existing in Pakistan as well. If we look at our water footprint as well, the water use efficiency is not there in terms of waste management and plastic waste management. The consumption and production patterns are not aligned with the targets, with the SDG targets on which currently the government of Pakistan is working. So there is a lot more gap that exists in terms of reaching out first at setting the targets. So we are still far behind in setting the targets, setting the baseline for the waste management or for the plastic waste management. So there is a lot to do work in terms of setting the baselines and then setting the targets to achieve the sustainable consumption and production in Pakistan. Although a lot of positive things have happened in last few years since 2017 onward, Pakistan has developed sustainable consumption and production national action plan. So that national action plan, yes, it guides us or it gives us a direction that how to move forward, but still there's a lot to move to actually set the baseline for those targets.
Thank you. Maybe we can explore that action plan and some examples of how you implement this a little bit more in detail later on. I'd first like to come back now to you, Mustan, and asking you, as I was mentioning before, at Tetrapak, you're saying, I read this in a few of the materials I looked into, that a package should save more than it costs. Could you explain to us briefly what that means and how this is related to the circular economy approach?
Sure, happy to, Dennis. This quote has really been part of the foundation of Tetrapak right from the very first day when our founder, Dr. Ruben Rausing in Sweden, proclaimed that a package should save more than it cost. And what this meant at the time was that he was looking to disrupt a market that needed access to safe and affordable foods in all parts of the world, and really revolutionized aseptic technology, which is a technology that enables nutritious foods like milk and juice and soups and broths to protect its nutritional value without needing refrigeration. And right from the very start, this was very innovative, and innovation has really been at the heart of Tetrapak right from that very first day. Our pursuit of innovation has never really stopped. Today we are investing heavily to design the world's most sustainable food package, which for us is a fully recyclable carton, which is made entirely from plants. It's not going to be cheap. But as a privately held company, we're very lucky to have a long-term perspective. It's costing somewhere of about 100 million euros per year for the next 10 years. And the whole company is buzzing with this transformative agenda. But it really started with that saying that you said, which is a package should save more than it costs. And it's really transformed into a whole company-wide effort to see how can we use that same approach of our founder, Dr. Ruben Rausing, to now apply to the societal challenges of a circular economy and sustainable consumption and production.
Dr. Saimer, would you say that this would be an answer to problems that you face in Pakistan?
Yes, Dennis, the answer is yes. And why it is yes? In Pakistan, currently, as we have started off with this current assignment with Switch Asia, so it has been revealed and found out that there's a lot to be done in terms of the technology designs or the product design or the packaging designs that needs a lot of attention. But market is there, but definitely there are a lot of gaps in terms of technology transfer, in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of investment, in terms of building the capacities, and in terms of building the local skills, and definitely also exploring that what resources are available locally that can be used and mainstream in taking up such kind of interventions while making it cost efficient as well. In terms of like countries like Pakistan, they're not developed countries; they are developing countries. They are because of the poverty dynamics existing in the country, people are looking for the cheaper alternatives. They are not yet concerned with the environmental cost. Yes, they are concerned with the economic cost of the technology transfer, which they are looking at that how they are going to bear the cost of technology change, which they are going to buy or purchase in terms of the product packaging. So this can be an answer, but there are a lot of steps that need to be take the country to the level where the masses are going to utilize such kind of the products.
Dr. Sana, you're quite hard to understand. Perhaps you can see that with your next contribution that you use a headphone or something like that. I think it would make it easier for us to understand. I would like to bring in at this point a reaction from the audience that Mustan, you've said that a fully recyclable carton is not going to be cheap. And then the question I see here is the sustainable production a luxury for rich countries or for large multinational companies? And perhaps before you answer, Mustan, I'd like to take this to Alexander, who, as I introduced, you are responsible somehow for the technical assistance that Dr. Saimer has also just mentioned that is required also in the global south to make progress on this agenda. And what is your take on this issue?
I think it's a very pertinent question. Indeed, we need to see the affordability of the solutions that are proposed. This is really important also because we don't want to have a solution that is applicable only to a very small part of our planet. We need solutions that can really go global and can be inclusive of all societies. Having said that, we need to take into consideration the metrics that we're using in order to say whether a solution is affordable or not. And if at a global scale, we take into consideration what are the implications for environmental and social externalities, we may be surprised that solutions that initially seem to be quite expensive, in reality, they are affordable. Again, we need to keep into consideration the fact that the production is globalized. So anything that Tetrapak, for example, as the example that Mustan mentioned, is going to be applying into its production, it's not going to be applied only in production in developed countries, but it will have huge implications across and along the value chain of suppliers. And this is where we really need to use the leverage of EU and other multinational corporations in order to be able to induce such innovations and incremental improvements in the sustainability of the production across all countries around the world.
Mustan, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to build off of what Alexander said, I think you've hit the nail on the head. If you look at it purely from a financial cost perspective, the economics maybe doesn't make as much sense. But if you start to talk about externalities, which is my favorite topic, then I think you have a different picture. One of those externalities is waste. The other is the social element to sustainable consumption and production. And then there are the potentially other environmental externalities that we might not see on a regular basis like we do with waste, for example, on climate or the impacts on biodiversity and nature. And all of this must actually go hand in hand. And what I would say to that is, and I hope we can address it later, is about legislation. And really seeing the role that public policy can have in unlocking that new economic equation that incorporates or internalizes the externalities. For example, today in some countries, we have one of those externalities internalized, like extended producer responsibility, which extends the responsibility beyond just the point of sale to back to the producer. It's based on this principle of the polluter pay principle. And Tetrapak is very much a strong supporter of extended producer responsibility. We've been one of the founding members of extended producer responsibility schemes where they exist, particularly in Europe, in Canada, where I'm from, in Japan, in South Korea, for example, now in Australia. And we see extended producer responsibility as an enabling legislation that can help us to internalize those externalities across the value chain, and then to have a better economic accounting of what does it mean when I say something is expensive. So I really, really appreciate the comment of internalizing those externalities. And one more piece, Dennis, I would just like to add about, is this concept of cheap or of an expensive product just a luxury concept? And the piece here I feel might help to address that is partnerships. It is one of the sustainable development goals about partnerships, and we are looking to see how much we can partner with our supply chain and our value chain. Sustainability for me is, if you talk to some of our customers and if you talk across the industry, many of those industry leaders are using sustainability as a competitive advantage in a competitive way. I don't see it this way. I actually think it shouldn't be something that we compete on. I think there might be a first mover advantage, and of course we would like to have that, and so would other companies. But at some point, this must just become mainstream. It's just an orderly way of doing business. And so when I talk about partnerships, it's very interesting to see now things that I would never ever talk about with my competitors, for example, in the past. We are now sitting at the table working on these things collectively in a new way. So I think that sort of partnership model is changing and evolving with the fact that we need to address this in a scaled way. And that's why partnerships for me are so important.
Can we
Dennis,
talk?
Dennis, I would like to make one comment if you allow me.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me now clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So my point, what Mustan has already said, I would like to mention 3 key areas that need to be considered, like taking up these kind of intervention in a country like Pakistan. So we are to focus on the public side of the intervention, like the legislations or the regulations side. Secondly, the private sector, and third is the engaging the communities. So engaging the communities is one of the core area in countries like Pakistan, because the sustainable consumption and production, it is all behaviors. It is all the consumer behavior which we are going to change. May it be the input may come from the public sector, input may come from the private sector, our input may come from the local communities. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect.
Maybe you can take up this point, Alexander, engaging the communities, explaining a little bit more what Saima probably has in mind there.
Yes, sure. I very much agree, actually, to what Saima brought up into the discussion. That, and I think also it was touched upon by Mustan, that we need to look into the ecosystem, not the independent individual actors. We're not going to go far if we just keep relying on very specific, maybe well-known actors. We need to see who else is involved to make sure that the circular economy can happen. That involves definitely some leaders, and the private sector could take that role. The governments with their policy could take that role, but we should not ignore the consumers. We should not ignore the local communities, as Saima said. And sometimes it's very difficult also to get their voices, because we're talking about dispersed voices and a large number of different opinions. And to bring them on board and make sure that what solutions we support are indeed addressing their needs is quite a challenge. But I think that we are on the right track in terms of this ecosystem approach. And I'm saying this because we have seen the desire for leadership coming from the European Union, but also from many other countries around the world. Leadership in a global change, global transition to a circular economy. We've seen global alliances, regional coalitions to serve that purpose. And that not only comes from the governments, but also comes from the private sector, which is very promising. Other actors that need to be involved, the finance sector. We need the finance sector. That's, I think, a huge aspect. If we want to stop speaking about successful pilot solutions, and we want to take the discussion into a wide-scale application, a wide-scale replication of the successful solutions, and the take-up of all those nice innovations coming from sometimes the developed world, take-up from other countries as well around the globe.
So how would you say do we strengthen incentives for investors to bring these innovations to scale?
Well, I think we need to face a reality, and that reality is that the banks have another business to do, and they're not going to change the way they're doing their business. We may come with very nice stories about saving the planet, saving the society, but for banks, business is business. They have their own way of looking into the bankability of the projects. So we need to help the companies, the private sector, all those that put together investment projects. We need to help them, support them in order to be able to build bankable projects. At the same time, we need to convince the finance sector that it's worth developing new financial products. And we need also probably to provide the capacity development into local banks so that these financial products can be rolled out also in developing countries with the support of development financing institutions. There's a lot to be done there. I don't think that there is a silver bullet that can really make the change happen, but we are on track in terms of changing the mindsets. We are building up in terms of inspiration, knowledge. We learn more about what it means to go circular. And I think also Mustan mentioned we are working on the policy sector to come up with conducive policies on that. We need to kind of support the business environment as a whole if we are to promote this ecosystem approach on a transition to a circular economy. I stop here because I'm sure that there are plenty of other things to say on this.
I would like to discuss a few examples of successful circular economy approaches in Pakistan, but also elsewhere. But before that, I would just like to take up the point about finance and investors and incentives. And I suppose that you addressed it before, Mustan. Extended producer responsibility legislation, in other words, is probably a way to do this and to set the incentives right. My question then is, I can imagine how we can implement something like that in Europe or in the US, perhaps in advanced countries. but how do we implement such a policy, such legislation in the global south, in Pakistan, for example? Or are we perhaps further already than we think we are? Mustan, you want to start, and then Saima can come in.
Sure, happy to, Dennis. Thanks for the question. It's a very good one. I think probably my reflection here is several years ago. I mean, this concept of internalizing externalities and the link to affordability and legislation was really a global north kind of an issue. And you would be surprised how much I see in terms of regulatory developments on extended producer responsibility in the global south and in developing and particularly emerging markets, frontier markets. I think we're already past that tipping point where it's almost an expectation in several key markets around the world, from India to Southeast Asia, to parts of Africa, and including Latin America and South America, where we see extended producer or forms of extended producer responsibility legislation being developed. We, together with the Consumer Goods Forum, which makes up some leading multinational brands and retailers, have put together a position paper actually on just exactly how governments could potentially implement extended producer responsibility in specific markets. But there is one precondition, there is two preconditions for that to actually be successful. The first is that we need an enabling legislative framework, a legal framework that has strong enforcement and the conditions to achieve the objectives. So it must be some form of an outcomes-based legislation that enables businesses to find and implement the creative ways to achieve the objectives. So that's the first one. And the second one, which maybe Dr. Saima Shafiq can speak a little bit more about, is the level of waste management infrastructure in the countries. And of course, this varies widely across the world. In some parts of the world, in Germany, it's extremely well organized. In Switzerland, for example, they polish the mountains and make sure everything is clean. In other parts of the world, that's not exactly there. And so I think there really has to be an acknowledgement to the degree in which waste management infrastructure has been developed in a country at a local and at a national level.
Dr. Saima, you've mentioned the National Action Plan in Pakistan previously. Could you share a few examples of successful models, successful enterprises in Pakistan with us, and perhaps also share their successes, but perhaps also where they have encountered obstacles?
Yeah, Dennis, before responding to your question, I would like to add on the comment which Mustan has already said, that in Pakistan, in the context of Pakistan, when we are going to implement the EPR system actually requires a lot on ground to be in place, like the regulations, like the legislative aspects, standard operating procedures of taking up such kind of interventions. And definitely the EPR evaluation framework needs to be implemented, and then EPR instruments that need to be taken up, like that need to be prioritized to take up any of the EPR intervention in Pakistan. So currently there's a lot of gap in taking up the EPR mechanism because currently no legislation or the regulation that promotes or facilitate or create an enabling environment for EPR is existing in Pakistan. So this is one of the findings from our Switch Asia work, which we did in the last 6 months. So this is one observation. Now taking up your question on the SCP NAP. Yes, under SCP NAP, we did a lot of factors were considered, and one of the key aspect is waste management as well. Under waste management, one model was promoted or proposed. It's not that that model was good enough. It was that is the only model that exists, that is integrated resource recovery model for solid waste management. So under integrated resource recovery model for solid waste management, the private entity or the small enterprise, they get themselves registered and organize a system where they can collect the solid waste management from the household level, and then do the segregation and recover the resources that can be either reused, recycled, or upcycled. So that is one model that is existing.
Dr. Simon, sorry to interrupt you. I can only hear a few bits and pieces of what you're saying, which is a pity because I would be interested in learning more about this.
Sure. Dennis, can you hear me smoothly now?
Oh, this is much better. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So under SCP NAP, I have just mentioned that under SCP NAP, a lot of discussion and deliberations were taken place in 2017. And in that time frame, an integrated resource recovery model was also proposed for solid waste management. Some of such enterprises are currently established in Pakistan, and they are working on a smaller scale. For that smaller scale, that enterprise actually collects the solid waste from the household and then recover the resources that can be reused, recycled, or upcycled. So, and then obviously they generate some kind of financial resources from the resource recovery and maintain their day-to-day business based on that. And major resource recovery from this intervention is based on the organic waste, because in Pakistan, the waste collected from the household or the municipal waste, that has almost 50 to 60% is the organic waste, and rest is the inorganic waste. So the major portion is the compost that is generated, and definitely from the plastic waste and the metal waste and the glass and the cardboard that is used to that is recovered to be reused or recycled. But such kind of models, they are not widespread in Pakistan. Only at smaller locations, they are working like for a 100 household community or a 200 household community. And the major factor which Mustan has already highlighted in his discussion, that a lot of waste management intervention success is actually based on the existing waste management infrastructure. Currently in Pakistan, the existing waste management infrastructure and is not the sanitary landfill site. Most of it is only dependent on the collection of solid waste, and then it's dumping somewhere, but to a place which is not actually the sanitary landfill site or engineered sanitary landfill site that actually averts. That is the only solution if we are making the solid waste management to we want to properly dispose of the solid waste, even if part of it is recycled, upcycled, or reused as well. So the major gap in Pakistan is absence of such kind of infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alexander, you have a reaction on that?
Yes. Thank you also, Salma, for explaining exactly how the system in Pakistan works. One observation mainly is that development cooperation very often has to follow huge challenges in the waste management sector. And that means basically infrastructure challenges. But there must be attention not to fall into the trap of solving one problem and then getting something else as a problem. And I'll be more specific. We see sometimes design of waste management systems that are mainly focusing on addressing the huge quantities of waste that currently exist in emerging economies, but without thinking that that way we lock into investments, long-year investments that do not take into consideration circularity at all. So we locked into investments that actually demand more waste in order to be financially profitable and viable. This is a huge, this is an issue with huge implications, I would say. but also a very tough one to solve. Because on the one hand, we have the realities of huge amounts of waste gathering in cities, mainly in developing countries. And on the other hand, we have the opportunity to design systems that are more circular, that mostly look into opportunities for reuse, recycling, and reducing the quantities of waste.
Mustan, you're nodding. Would you like to add something on that?
I'm nodding because I think Alexander and I can get along very well, and that's great. No, I fully agree with everything he says. I'm just agreeing.
Excellent. I would like to shift the discussion just a little bit beyond the environmental impact of the circular economy and look more into what is often called the just transition. I think it is quite clear, in fact, how the circular economy can improve the environmental impact of production, industry, and so on. This is obvious, and that's inherent in the system. Yet, if we think of approaching a circular economy, if we think of it as an economic transition of a larger scale, we will probably have a few winners and a few losers in that transition. And my question would be perhaps to you, Alexander, to begin with, do we actually know that a transition to a circular economy can be just in terms of good jobs for people, in terms of sustainable value chains, sustainable relationships between, also at the local level, between customers and suppliers? What is your take on that?
Well, thanks, Dennis. I think this is a very pertinent question, also within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the upcoming recovery that we all expect that will come soon. And I'll explain myself better. What we have seen, and there's increasing evidence for that, is that circular economy can deliver on not only economic, but also environmental and social goals and objectives. We have some evidence coming not only from developed countries, but also from developing countries. And I'll give the example of a modeling exercise, a study that was commissioned by the European Union on the circular economy, EU cooperation on the circular economy in Africa. And that modeling actually came up with some very interesting results, saying that by 2030, for example, what circular economy could bring into the continent is an increase in GDP, but also in employment, in total employment. And I'm talking about 2.2 increase in percent increase in GDP and 2.7 in total employment compared to a business as usual scenario. This is extremely interesting because we're not just talking about an overall notion, general notion that there could still be growth with circular economy. We are actually arguing here that the circular economy can bring more growth, more jobs, into a continent like Africa. Of course, the continent is diverse and there's been some different figures coming up in different countries, but there were on that same study 8 national case studies and also indicate the same trend. So
what is the mechanism behind this, Alexander?
Right, the mechanism is that we have the economy shifting into other sectors. You have opportunities not only for the waste sector and the recycling sector, which definitely brings in a large number of jobs and has also some opportunities to formalize the informal sector, which is another big chapter and that's worth of further discussing. We also have opportunities in higher, let's say, level jobs coming from new business models, new circular business models like those that are linking the use of a product to consumers instead of the purchase of a product. The ownership remains to the company, and the users, the consumers, can have enjoy the same benefits by using it. This kind of more circular approaches into entrepreneurship can have extremely positive results in terms of job creation.
Dr. Saima, do you see evidence of that also in your country? And do you have examples of the projects that you have worked with where you see something like that?
Yeah, Dennis, yes, there are examples around the benefits of the circular economy if such models are taken up, like integrated resource recovery model that was being placed. The purpose was actually to formalize an informal sector because in Pakistan, there's a huge informal sector that exists with solid waste management sector, and most of them are actually the children from the urban slums who are coming up and picking up the recyclables or the reusables from the waste. The Integrated Resource Recovery Center, what they have promoted, that they have formalized a platform where the local communities, they can get themselves engaged and also build up the linkages and the partnerships as well, and support the local communities as well. But the huge challenge is when we are talking about or discussing or engaging this informal sector, there's a lot of hue and cry around because a lot of children are involved in this informal sector. So that becomes the biggest challenge in terms of that. Even if we are going to formalize this sector, what we are going to do with the children? What are we laying them off? Because these children are coming from the families, from the urban slums who are extremely poor. Their parents, they are working somewhere and they're sending their children to make some money per day to generate some of the resources for their home as well. So there are a lot of social challenges around this informal sector that needs to be captured, packaged in a way that can become a success. But yes, there are a lot of opportunities that exist. Even when Pakistan, in Islamabad, we did the ban on the single-use plastic bag. There's a lot of opportunity that was generated for the alternative products as well. And it has created some, not only the resource recovery, but also promoting some local entrepreneurs to generate some kind of products that are that can be used or that are eco-friendly. So yes, examples are there, but then we need to see that how we are going to package such interventions.
But then we have to see, and can you repeat what you said in the end?
I said then we have to see that how the interventions are going to be designed and packaged in a way so that we can avoid the social aspects of these interventions. As I mentioned, that children are engaged. A lot of informal sector is they're based on the children who are coming from urban slums.
Mustan, so I think, I mean, we're living in a global economy, and companies, I mean, with global value chains stretching across many countries in the world, and many multinational companies being active in these global value chains. They obviously, these companies, along with policymakers in the home countries of these companies, also have a responsibility, obviously, for getting these things right. Parts of the problems that Dr. Saimer has just mentioned have to be considered, I think, also in Germany and elsewhere where we are based currently. Do we need to reshape global value chains, you think? Or, I mean, at least we have to have the whole value chain sort of in sight when we produce, I suppose. And what do you think can be done to ensure this?
That's a good question, and it's a loaded question because there's a lot in there, and I don't know how much time. I mean, I could talk about this for a while, but maybe if I may.
We have 7 minutes left, so
I will try to do this in a minute then. Well, if I may, maybe just try to condense it to a few things. We do believe that value chains, global value chains, need to adapt and be transformed. And you know, Alexander was talking a little bit about entrepreneurial spirit to this, but there is also an intrapreneurial spirit to this as well. And companies, including mine, where I mentioned earlier, we're spending 100 million a year for the next 10 years on innovation. we are desperate looking for talent who can help us get there. And I think that that's an excellent opportunity to sort of, work on the just transition and bring that business perspective to that just transition. And the circular economy, we must look at it as more than just an environmental policy. It's an economic policy as much as it is an environmental policy. Mm-hmm. And so, if I could, just maybe touch on a couple areas where I think are super important from our perspective and from a private sector perspective, is there really, there's a few inconvenient truths when you talk about, scaling some of these things and looking at global value chains. We have planetary boundaries. You've all seen the documentaries. There's a new one with Johan Rockström and this and the Stockholm Resilience Institute and David Attenborough, and we talk about these planetary boundaries. And so at some point we have to address, consumption. We have to address efficiency. Can we be doing more by using less? We have to address sufficiency. Are there even enough materials in the world for a company like mine to actually use and produce in the right way? And so, I think we need a rethink of how sufficiency, efficiency, and consumption work together. And we can't do this alone. And we would like, and we invite those in the audience here to maybe let's get in touch and have a discussion, because we brought together a multi-stakeholder group consisting of the business community, consisting of NGOs and thought leaders, and even, for example, the European Commission, to address these issues in a way. And we have a call to action that I would be very happy to share with some of you if you're interested, to just see exactly how to do this. And I, again, don't have much more time here, but would welcome a further conversation on that value chain transformation.
Alexander, a quick reaction on that from you?
Yeah, I'm a true believer into the leverage that the multinational companies have in shaping the value chains. I share the same opinion with Mustan on that there is an opportunity there. I would like to also share information about the new initiative that is being supported by the European Union. It's called the Switch to Circular Economy Value Chains. And it involves work by UNIDO, the European Investment Bank, Chatham House, and the Circular Economy NGO. And what it basically tries to do is to help SMEs, suppliers in developing countries through the leverage of the EU multinationals to embed circularity aspects into their production cycles.
Thank you, very important. So let's use the last 2 minutes that we have for a very quick final round. And as I've said in the beginning of this panel, working for the Global Solutions Initiative, we are looking at the G20 in particular and trying to devise research-based policy recommendations to the G20, who, as you will all know, also has this agenda of, climate change protection, against climate change and biodiversity protection, etc., on their agenda. If you would formulate a short wish to the G20, what would that be? Dr. Seimer, starting with you, Mustan and Alexander going last.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. So I have actually listed down 3 areas that needs to be considered. One is the enabling environment for circular economy, considering both the legal basis and infrastructure side. And then promotion of circular economy pilot projects for waste management in Pakistan. And the third one is the just transition to formalize the informal sector, which I have already highlighted. So these are the 3 main points that I would like to register now. Thank
you. Mustan.
To add to Dr. Seimer there, I would just add to embrace and promote multilateral partnerships that include all stakeholders. I think, Alexander, you mentioned the ecosystem approach, and I think that's absolutely right. And the second one is quite simply put a price on all externalities.
Great, thank you, Alexander.
Thank you. I think Mustan just. Yeah, I had 2 recommendations, one strategic, one operational. Mustan just mentioned the operational, which is focus on the ecosystem and not only on individual actors. And the strategic here is to focus on restoring well-being, not only on economic growth, no matter how fast or strong the economic rebound is going to be after the COVID-19, and I'm putting the discussion there as well, it's not going to improve people's life on its own. So we need a broader development agenda for that. And that's my recommendation for the G20.
Thank you very much, all of you. This is very much in the spirit of recoupling of economic prosperity and social prosperity and environmental sustainability, obviously. Thank you all for joining this discussion, and thank you all also for the questions that we've received. And I think looking at them, we've addressed a lot of the issues that have also been asked by the audience. Thank you so much for coming, and bye-bye.